Let's solve some quadratics by completing the square. The advantage to the completing the square method is it will work for any quadratic. This is unlike factoring and the square root method that only work in certain cases. So we're going to take a look at two different examples. First one, x squared minus 8x plus 2. Step 1, move the constant to the other side. So x squared minus 8x equals negative 2. Step 2, complete the square. To complete the square, I look at the number in front of the x. It's an 8. I divide it by 2, and then I square it. 8 divided by 2 is 4, and 4 squared is 16. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 16, and I have to do that to both sides to keep the equation balanced. Then we can factor the left-hand side, and we can factor it as something squared. It's going to be x, because there's a minus sign. This will be a minus sign. And it'll be 4, because 4 squared is 16, and 4 plus 4 gives us 8. Minus 2 plus 16 is 14. And now we can use our square root method to finish. I take the square root of both sides. Don't forget the plus or minus. So x minus 4 equals plus or minus root 14. To finish, I'm going to add 4 to the other side. So x equals 4 plus or minus square root of 14. And there's my solution. Now, let's take a look at an example that's a little bit harder. So we can use the same process. Step 1, I'm going to move the constant over. 3x squared minus 5x. And then to move the constant over, I add 4, so it's going to equal 4. Step 2, complete the square. Before we can complete the square, we need the first term to just be an x squared. The first term here is a 3x squared, so I'm going to divide everything by 3. So now I've got x squared minus 5 thirds, 5 divided by 3, x equals 4 thirds. To complete the square, we're going to do the same thing we did on the left side. We look at the number in front of the x, the 5 thirds. We're going to take that number and we're going to divide it by 2 and then square it. It's exactly what I did on the other side. The numbers were nicer. I took the 8, divided it by 2, and then squared it. So same process here. 5 thirds divided by 2 is the same as 5 thirds times a half. Or, if I multiply straight across, 5/6. So I take the number in front of the x, 5 thirds, I cut it in half, that gives me 5/6. And then if I square that, I get 25 over 36. So that's what I have to add to both sides. So plus 25 over 36, same thing added to both sides. So again, just to summarize, the steps were, I take the number in front of the x, did that in both cases, divide it by 2, which means cut it in half, and then square it. And that's what I'm going to add to both sides. Okay, now we are ready to factor. And the reason we complete the square is because now this left-hand side can be factored as something squared. It's always going to be x, and then the sign is going to be the same sign you see in front of your linear term. So minus 5 thirds, so I know it's going to be a minus. And when you factor, it's always going to be x plus or minus whatever number you squared. And so in this case, it'll be 5 over 6. And that's because if you FOIL this out, you would get 5 over 6 times 5 over 6, and that gives you the 25 over 36. 5 over 6 plus 5 over 6 gives you the 5/3. Okay, so we factored, and then I am going to have to do some addition on the right-hand side. I need a common denominator to do that. I'll use 36. So I'm going to take 4/3 and multiply that by 12 over 12. So what does that give me? That gives me 48 over 36 plus 25 over 36. And now that I have the same denominator, I can add the numerators. 48 plus 25, what is that? 73. And then the denominator stays 36. Okay, so 73 over 36. And now we are ready to finish the problem by taking the square root of both sides. Don't forget that plus or minus. And then we can finish by solving for x. So let's see, x minus 5 over 6 equals plus or minus. And let's see, 73 is not a perfect square, so that's going to stay under the square root. But 36 is a perfect square, so we can simplify that. The square root of 36 is 6. And then finally, to finish, I'm going to add the 5, 6 to the other side. So 5 over 6 plus or minus root 73 over 6. And there's my solution.